Welcome to the tactical preview of Arsenal versus Manchester City. In this series, what I try to do is predict how City will line up in the match. I go over the strengths and weaknesses of the opponent, and then how might that inform how City will line up and set up in the match. What can be exploited? What do we need to look out for from the opponent? What we see in front of us are the lineups of both sides in their most recent Champions League matches. City against Napoli, unchanged from the derby, and then you have Arsenal against Athletic Bilbao, both sides winning 2-0 actually in those matches. It's important to note immediately that I wouldn't expect Moreno to start if Ødegaard is available. He did get injured in their game against Nottingham Forest, so he had to go off, wasn't available for the Bilbao game, but you better believe if Ødegaard is available to start, he would definitely be starting because he's really important to how Arsenal set up and press in particular. There is a reason why they are one of, if not the best defensive sides in the entire world with their really compact 4-4-2. They strike the perfect balance between being compact vertically and horizontally. It's very frustrating to watch if you want Arsenal to drop points. Obviously, they've only conceded one goal so far this season, and that was that ridiculous free kick at Liverpool. That being said, they aren't infallible, they aren't imperious to chances against them at Old Trafford. They weren't particularly good in that match, and they could have conceded a number of goals in that match, I would suggest. So there is absolutely a world where City can break them down. It's not the end of the world, but that being said, when we get onto the City section, it's worth noting that it will be very tricky for City to break them down. When they went to their on-ball, it was they had like a classic sort of 4-3-3, so Moreno would drop. Calafiori and Timber have this license to push up, and like Calafiori in particular has this license to overlap Eze to allow Eze to access more central areas. Conversely, Eze is more than capable of hugging out wide, Calafiori providing an underlapping option as well. Think about Calafiori's role as more of like a Guardiola role from a couple of seasons ago. Expect to see Timber lining up in a back three in that first phase and then pushing up as Arsenal get into more of a settled defensive shape. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was more of a diamond in midfield, where you had like a Calafiori forming part of that diamond, but there is just equally a chance that because it's quite a big game, Arteta might want to be more rigid and solid in the midfield. He might just opt for a pretty typical double pivot. The main threat for Arsenal, if it is this team in particular, you'll notice that the midfield is, I'm not having a go, but let's be honest, without the presence of Ødegaard, the technical level of that midfield is not especially threatening from a creative offensive perspective. That's not the same as saying none of these players are creative players, because absolutely I've seen Moreno, Rice, Zubimendi, all of them be creative forces, but they aren't the same level as an Ødegaard, are they, necessarily? So I would consider, if this is the team that Arsenal put out, that the chief threat will be from Eze and Madueke. Madueke, who is obviously filling in for Saka. So whoever City's left back is, they're going to have to deal with him being really direct. And then Eze, who is one of these tricky wingers, and especially if Calafiori does provide that overlapping option, whether just approaching that position or just rotating with Eze quite fluidly, we're going to have to be really careful of Eze as well. As I say, I consider these two players the chief creative threats in the side. One thing to note from that Bilbao game and the games prior is expect to see something like this. So Calafiori will pick up like this left side position here. You'll have Madueke being the fullback there. And when Eze picks up the ball in these sorts of areas, Gyökeres will always make this run off that right centre-back inwards, so in between the full-back and that right centre-back. It's always like this curved ball, which is really frustrating, so Calafiori drags over the right-back. This leaves basically Gyökeres in a 1v1 with whoever that right centre-back is. So it's really important that whoever our right centre-back is in the match, that they are properly locked in and switched on to the threat of Gyökeres, who I didn't think had a particularly good game against City last season, despite scoring a hat-trick. However, one of the things he was good at was he was able to pin himself onto Simpson Puzzi, and he got lots of joy like that. Now, Bilbao got a fair bit of joy in like the first 60-ish minutes just by being really compact and solid and playing their own 4-4-2 to basically match up against Arsenal's in-possession shape. They went quite direct, they were very assertive and aggressive in how they played, and it got them a decent amount of joy in the second balls as well. I would love to say that City will play like that. I am just unsure as to whether, first of all, we have that defensive structure intact. We're still relatively early days in the season, and our 4-1-4-1 out of possession is still being tinkered by Pep, isn't it? It was the 4-1-4-1 that we saw against Napoli, even in that first 20 minutes, was set up very differently to the 4-1-4-1 in the United game previously. So clearly they're still ironing out issues here, whereas Arsenal are in a more like finalised form. City clearly not the case. So I don't think we're going to be able to play the same way as Bilbao did off ball, as compact. We've not seen it yet so far this season. And I don't know whether we're going to be able to replicate the same on-ball threat that Bilbao did either. So let's just move on to City now for a second. And let's assume, and this is a spoiler actually, I'm going to predict the City just play the exact same starting 11. I'll get into what I would like to do potentially, but Pep keeps mugging me off, so I'm just going to predict him to play the exact same team. It's all predicated on how we think Arsenal are going to play in the game. Leave a comment down below. How do you think Arsenal are going to approach this one? They are at home. They are the favourites, there's no doubt about it. Are they going to be incredibly aggressive in their forward press, try to force us into errors and long balls? Or are they going to go break us down and then we'll hit you on the counter with our threats of Madueke and Gyökeres? I'm going to assume that because they are at home, they're going to want to try to take the game to City. They're going to try to play on the front foot. They're going to try to win the ball back from us. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. I think it could go either way with Arteta's Arsenal, and that's why they're quite a dangerous opponent for City to play. This is the first true big test for City. Either way, there are issues with both of those, because if they do deploy their really high press, with whether it's Gyökeres, Moreno, Gyökeres, Ødegaard, whoever, this is going to be the first proper build-up challenge for Donnarumma and indeed just the rest of City's backline. We know that City have struggled to certain extents this season with their build-up. We haven't yet seen it properly with Donnarumma because United didn't press us necessarily. The other match that we've obviously had was Napoli when we were playing 10 men for 70 minutes, so we didn't really see how they were going to approach it from an entire game perspective. So this might be the first occasion where that takes place. In which case, if this is the same back four, including the goalkeeper, we are going to struggle to build up. And I would go as far as to say that I don't even know if we would be able to do it successfully. It may well be that a better strategy is to just, if they are going to deploy a high press, just let Donnarumma punt it up and try to find Haaland. I've put the arrow there. Why have I put the arrow there? Against United, when City got to 3-0 up and City just punted it up, Haaland pinned himself on Lenny Yoro, the right centre-back. This makes sense because if you're going to punt it up, whether from a goal kick or from just open play, whatever, and you're going to accept there's going to have to be a second ball situation, you want that second ball battle to take place out wide. And if you lose it out wide, it's far less threatening than if you lose it in the centre. Timber's less than 6 foot. I think he's 5'10". Haaland's like 6'5". I would expect him to win the aerials there. So it's a double whammy of why that might be a viable strategy for City if they feel the need to just punt it up because of how succinct and how clever Arsenal's high press is. As we know, the other way to do it would be to just back yourself in the build-up, in which case you might want to, play Foden even deeper. Like almost having like a sort of like a double pivot situation with Rodri, like Pedri sort of vibe. So he's able to really help out with the build-up. So City have a far stronger left-sided build-up as an example. I don't know how reasonable that would be to predict, however. So I'm therefore not going to predict that's what we're going to do. So I do think that what we might see is City try to win the second ball battle out wide. As I say, maybe pinning Haaland up against Timber. That could be a thing. Otherwise, I think we're going to have a bad time. What if Arsenal just say, you know what? We've seen that sometimes you are your own worst enemies, City. Have the ball. Break us down. We are one of, if not the best defensive sides in the world. Get past our compact mid-block. It's unlikely a long ball game is going to be beneficial then. So how can City ultimately break them down? Now, maybe they can't. Again, Arsenal have conceded 1 goal so far this season. If there is going to be anything, however, then I do think, and whilst I'm not going to predict this, I think that we have to fundamentally change the right side of the attack. Kusanov played basically in that first half against Napoli as a right winger for the most part. And I adored the fact that Kusanov was not fazed by being asked to basically play as a right winger on ball. Sometimes he was even popping up into like the right 10 sorts of areas. He was popping in crosses from that right side. I loved how he was clearly unfazed, and I loved how Pep had that faith in him. But let's be honest, it was a black hole of creativity and threats. We saw it at the Etihad in that 0-0 a couple of years ago. I think it was Akanji and Guardiola who were our main wide outlets that day, and they just simply did not care. They just left acres of space for those players because they knew that they couldn't do anything like from a dribbling perspective, but they also knew that if you cross the ball in, then Gabriel, Saliba that day, Raya, who's fantastic at claiming crosses, they're going to eat that up all day. They love those sorts of battles. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. If City want to be a bit more adventurous, we are going to have a chat about a different right-back option, because, again, a centre-back is not offering nearly enough offensive value in that instance, and it's going to be far too easy for Calafiori and Eze. I've seen lots of people suggest that maybe we could play, Nico in the midfield to have a bit more solidity. The reason why I'm not going to predict Pep to do that is because I don't think there is any midfield that City can put out which we know help deal with the physical second ball dual winning threats of Rice, Moreno, Zubimendi and or Ødegaard if he's playing. If you drop Reinders for Nico, let's say, because that's the suggestion that I've seen, you're losing too much on ball, and the off ball benefit, or rather the physicality element of it that you're gaining, I don't know if it's going to make that much of a difference anyway. I think we'd still lose the midfield battle even if we put out our, from a physicality perspective anyway, we'd still lose that physical battle regardless of what midfield we'd put out. Like, I think we'd have to put out like a team of like Rodri, Nico and like John Stones or something to even have a chance. For me, it makes more sense to keep Reinders on the pitch, have his offensive threat and try to hit Arsenal and try to beat Arsenal in a different way. We know we're not going to beat them from that physical dual winning perspective. Can we beat them in the technical sense in the centre? And this is where I believe Doku is going to become absolutely vital. We saw how excellent he was against Napoli. He is the sort of player when you're up against that sort of low block like Napoli did, or indeed like Arsenal's mid block, he's just able to be here, and then all of a sudden the ball's in the back of the net like 5 seconds later on his own. If City are going to score a goal in this game, a lot of it is going to depend on the ability of Doku to take on Mosquera or Saliba, whoever that right centre-back is. Of course, Foden, who technically started at right wing off ball against Napoli, but then Bernardo drifted out, and then Foden was obviously able to impact the play more so from the centre. This is where our small space operators are going to be vital. And that's, I think, regardless of how Arsenal line up and set up, if they are going to play a high press, then we end up, if that long ball strat just doesn't work, we're going to really need to lean on those small space players. Conversely, or rather likewise, if Arsenal set up really defensively and don't high press, then we're still going to need those small space operators. So I'm looking to Doku, I'm looking to Foden to really be those cogs and really be those game breakers. I don't know if that's controversial. I'm going to say Pep to play the exact same team. I would like to see Bob instead of Bernardo, probably. I would also probably like to see Nunes play at right back. That being said, I would still play Kusanov, probably at right centre back though. When I mentioned earlier, those balls that Eze does for Gyökeres in behind that right centre back, and Gyökeres tries to pin himself on that right centre back, what I need in that situation is a monster who is not going to get beaten. I need a warrior in there who's going to be able to match up to Gyökeres and basically bully him back. I think that's what Kusanov is. However, I can't see a world where Diaz doesn't play and Guardiola simply has to play. Absolutely, there is no debate there. Given the likelihood that Diaz isn't going to get dropped, maybe it doesn't make sense to do so anyway. Kusanov, I'm going to predict to start at right back anyway, and we shall see what happens there in respect of our creativity going forwards. As I say, hopefully Bob can come on, because otherwise a right side of Kusanov and Bernardo on ball ain't really doing anything against Arsenal, who have Calafiori at left back. So those are my thoughts. I'm going to predict 0-0. I'm going to have faith in Donnarumma to keep another clean sheet. I do not know if it's sensible for me to predict Arsenal to concede a goal, considering they've conceded one goal and it was that Liverpool free kick. So I'm going to not predict us to win for the first time this season. I think 0-0 is a reasonable prediction. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on the video. It's free and it does help support me, and it lets me know that you are still enjoying these tactical previews, and I'll keep doing them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.